Our speaker this evening happens to be the founder of WinStar. It was founded in 1976 by this gentleman, and he's really been the catalyst and the creative spark to what WinStar is all about. He not only is acclaimed as one of the greatest entertainers around, but I think that his music and what he has done with film and documentaries has really contributed and had a tremendous impact on uplifting consciousness in this country and around the world. And more importantly than that, I think that the work he's done and the commitment he's made to a wide variety of social issues, world hunger, whales and dolphins, wildlife, wilderness, nuclear nonproliferation, appropriate technology. It's been a fantastic commitment from a person who has started out just singing for people. And I don't know how well you know him. I've worked with John for going on 5 years now, and you really have to be around him to get a full feeling for the incredible amount of enthusiasm and spirit. I mean, it'll kill you if you stay around him too long, I guarantee it. And it's also an amazing joy that I have to be working with him. He's right now on a 7-month tour, and if you've ever been on a 7-month tour, the way he does it, it's a sort of a superhuman effort. He sings every night in a different city. He'll be in over 100 cities in the next few months, and he sings to up to 18,000 people for 2.5 hours, standing up there, no intermission, no opening act. And what's more important to me, and what I really conceive of as signs of greatness, is before the concert, every day he does 1 or 2 press conferences, and this time he's speaking on his work with the Presidential Commission on World Hunger. And if you can imagine doing that type of tour and maintaining the type of commitment and responsibility to transforming the world that he does, it's quite a joy to behold. And my and WinStar's dearest friend, John Denver. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I am more excited than I can possibly tell you about being here this evening, and I want to welcome you and to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to spend some time with you and share some of my thoughts. I feel especially privileged to be representing, to some degree, the WinStar Project and the WinStar Foundation in what I'm doing this evening. And it is with great anticipation and joy and a little nervousness that I stand before you this evening. It amazes me, you know, Tom mentions I do concerts for up to 20,000 people. You know, sometimes larger crowds. There are not so many buildings that'll hold more than that. I think the largest crowd that we've played to indoors is a place called the Coliseum in Cleveland, holds 22,000 people. And one night there, about 3 years ago, we did 2 shows in a row. 2.5-hour concerts, 44,000 people. And I love it. You know, I can get up there and sing all night, and I feel totally comfortable and with people and able to relax and be myself. But go out and talk to a few hundred people, my knees start shaking, and it's quite a different feeling. And it has to do with, you know, this is not a comfortable arena for me. This is not really a part of my experience. It's not what I'm used to. So it's obvious and understandable that somebody would be a little bit nervous. And that's, you know, has to do with what I want to speak to you tonight. I have this wonderful topic on being human. That is a wonderful title for my talk. I can talk about anything. Which is exactly why I chose that title. It also allows me to address certain aspects of ourselves which, no matter who you are or where you come from or what faith you have or what political or sociological system you adhere to, I think that some of what I have to say tonight is going to speak to you. And it's because you're a human being, not any of that other stuff. I don't use notes or anything. I will use water. And I have a gift from a friend of mine, Swami Muktananda, who I saw a little over a week ago in Miami. He sends his love and his grace to everyone always, certainly to you people here, and is listening tonight. You know, there's 8,000 things that I want to talk to you about. And that's been the case for a while. This is only about the 7th time that I've ever spoken to people, made a speech, if you will. And it's something that I'm getting used to, and I hope that I have the chance to do more often. But I've never before looked forward to speaking to somebody as I have here, to my friends and neighbors here in Aspen, with whom I feel such a strong connection about what I want to do in the world. So I'd like to start this evening. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and where these things that I'm going to tell you tonight come from. And it's not the stuff that you hear in or read about in biographies or newspaper interviews necessarily. It's going to be just some things that I feel about myself, that I've noticed in looking back about why it is that I'm doing these things that I'm doing today. I was always a very insecure person. It is only recently that I've overcome that, if I have. And I feel that I have. And it troubled me why I was so insecure. You know, I never had to worry anything. Life has always been pretty good to me. My father was in the service. He had a guaranteed income. We lived well. I was never hungry. I never had a hard time from many of the things that you generally think about, you know, people who are suffering in the world. But I suffered a lot, and I did feel insecure. And it's because it seems to me that somehow I felt a little bit differently than anybody that I knew. Some of the things that I felt inside me, some of the things that I did, the way that I lived, the things that I liked to do, that I had the strength to do, the things that I didn't like to do, and no matter how hard I was pushed, I would not go with that. You know, and it just seemed like there was nobody like me, really. Well, one of the things that I've learned is that somehow for me, it's not that there was nobody like me. I think that we're all the same, quite frankly. But the world in which we live as human beings, and the way the world acts on us as human beings, and the way human beings relate with other human beings, has created a kind of situation where it's really not okay to be yourself. And if I was different, it's because I was always willing to be myself. That was difficult. That was very painful. And it's something that's going on in my life now that really has me relating to young people. You know, it's like where a lot of this stuff started coming up for me is I was asked a few years ago to speak at the Aspen High School graduation exercises. And I thought then about what is it that I would like to say to them on this very auspicious occasion. What is it that I wish somebody had told me back when I was graduating from high school? And it had to do with this thing, being yourself. And so that's what I spoke to him about. You know, I spoke to him about discovering yourself, finding out who you are, what it is that you like, the things that you like to do, the people that you like to hang out with, the things that you're talented with, the things that you do that other people don't do, or things that other people do that you can't do. You know, it's like me, I can play a guitar like mad, but put a screwdriver in my hand, and I am a terror to behold. You know, I damage things. So, I'm a musician, you know? Now, I was pretty good in math, but not too good in sciences. And I was bored to death with history, and I loved English and words. You know, that's all you find out about yourself. And then you start getting of an age where you're in high school, and other influences start acting on you in a way that get to be very powerful. There are people around us saying, hey, man, smoke this. Or if it's not this, it's just cigarettes. You know, that's all it was to me. God, I mean, junior high school, the 8th grade is when kids started smoking. And I couldn't believe that, you know, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I just never happened. people going out drinking on weekends in junior high school and high school. And I never, that didn't work for me, you know. It didn't feel comfortable for me. I think a lot of that had to do with my upbringing. A lot of it had to do with my own sense of myself. But the point is that there was a great deal of peer pressure to do these things. And most often people succumb to that pressure. Nowadays, there's even more powerful influences out there acting on us. We have things going on television all the time that say, this is what you have to do to be successful. This is what you have to be successful. This is what you have to wear. This is how you have to look. You know, television initially was supposed to reflect our society. I think what has happened now is that television is becoming more the effective catalyst to society. You know, it doesn't, we're starting to emulate what we see on television. You know, I mean, I watch television very rarely these days, but I'll tell you, when I do, some stuff comes on, that's not the world that I live in. I don't know anybody that lives, I know a lot of people. And I don't know anybody that lives like the Dukes of Hazzard. You know? I don't know anybody that lives or lived like Laverne and Shirley. I don't know anybody like Charlie's Angels. You know, and yet there's this constant deluge that we get through the media that tells us that this is what life is like. You know, that there are people out there like James Rockford. He happens to be one of the attractive ones, in my opinion, the way he lives and works. There ain't nobody out there like that, as far as I know. And yet we have all of this input that says that this is how it is, or how it should be, or how you should be, or how you should act. And you start going into a city now. I get to travel a lot too. And I go around cities and I see people putting themselves, you know, efforting to be like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a little bit more naive about that. I don't spend too much time in the cities. And when I'm there, I'm working. I'm not out seeing the town and stuff like that. If I'm doing that, I have Annie with me, and we go to a dinner and a play or go to a movie. So, you know, the disco thing is a little bit, I shouldn't be speaking so strongly about that. Maybe that is the way it is out there, you know. But I do wonder how much of it has to do with what we've been said is how it ought to be, as opposed to what really reflects you and I as human beings and how we want to spend our time. You know? So I was telling those high school kids about that, and I started thinking about it more myself. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, over a period of time, I got involved in making a film. Now, things were going pretty well. I'll tell you, Oh God. I don't know if any of you saw that movie. Oh God floated around Hollywood for about 5 years with very little interest from anybody. The closest it got to being made a film is that they talked to Alan Arkin about playing Jerry Landers, the role that I played in the movie. And it just never went any further than that. Well, during that same time period, we were starting to take a look at whether or not I might be able to do a movie or not. And I was interested in that. I would like to try that. I would like to do it. But I just didn't want to do a movie to do a movie. I wanted to do something that you know, meant something to me, or had something that I could identify with, relate to, the way I feel about my music, you know? And that we looked at several hundred scripts, and there was just nothing. And all of a sudden, I got this little script, Oh God. And I read it and was just delighted in the story, shed a few tears, laughed a lot. And I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I went back to my office in Los Angeles and got Jerry Weintraub, and we started working to put that film together, and eventually ended up making the movie. So I'd like to tell you the scene. You know, the whole thing worked for me, but there was one particular scene that keyed it all in for me, if you will. It's the scene where Jerry Landers first comes face to face with God in the bathroom. Remember that? And it's like he's all of a sudden starting to believe that this guy is who he says he is. And so he asks him, why is it that you chose this particular time to appear? And God says in the script, well, I made the world to work. Time out. little click over here for me. I believe the world was made to work. So I read that and went on. It says, but I look down now, and you're filling my rivers full of crap. The skies, the air you can't breathe. You know, you're wasting my world. And Jerry Landers agrees with that. He says, have you read the papers lately? I mean, it ain't working. Click. It wasn't working, folks, 3-4 years ago when we started doing that, and it's working even less so now, in my opinion. So then he says, well, Jerry asked God, why don't you do something about it? And God says, why don't you do something about it? It's your world. Click. It's our world. If we pull it out, it's not going to be because of divine intervention or some miraculous thing that occurred over here. It's going to be because we chose to do it. We started acting like human beings. Jerry Landers says to God, but we need help. And God says, that's why I gave you each other. I believe that we are here for each other, not against each other. In fact, I don't believe that. I know it. I'll try to be very careful tonight and tell you what I think or what I believe and what I know. And I know that the world was made to work. I know that we have everything that it takes to have life grow fruitfully, multiply, and be fulfilling and satisfying for every living creature. We have all it takes. And I know that we are here for each other. And it is when we start acting like that that we will make the world work. So that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. I'm going to talk pretty forcefully. I can't do it less than that. And I'm just giving you my feelings, my opinion. This is how I look at the world. This is why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. You know? Now, I don't want to convince you about any of this. Nor do I want to argue. What I want to do is just put it out there and see if any of it rings true for you. And if it does, that's wonderful. And if it doesn't, that's also wonderful. I would hope that if it touches you enough to where you want to let me know about it, either positively or negatively, that you will do so. You know, I'm here because I want to make a contribution in the world. In my mind, it ain't working. And I happen to have some feelings about how it can be made to work. You know, and what happens for me is over the years, I have been singing songs for people. I've never tried to write a hit record, folks. I never did that. And I've had some hit records. What I did try to do was to take down my own feelings, my own experiences, and to express them as honestly and clearly and succinctly and beautifully as possible, in a way, hopefully, that would communicate. That if I said it, you know, right, then somebody else might be able to relate to that and say, yes, that's how I feel. Well, my experience in the world tells me that I'm very good at that. And see, I've had this feeling that perhaps if for all of these, you know, people write me letters and they tell me about the fact that they've used one of my songs in their wedding, or they've had my music played in the background as their child was being born. Pretty far out. You know, but what it says is that somehow that music is meaningful to them. Now, it may not be meaningful to everybody, and there happen to be a lot of people I know who don't like it at all. But there are some people to whom it is very, very meaningful. You see, and what they say to me in those letters is that very deep feelings that they've had, experiences that they've had, or dreams that they share, that they've never been able to articulate, that I said it for them. You know, it thrills me. I mean, that's what I want to do. And so to get that kind of acknowledgement, that kind of feedback, that's the cake and the icing too, as far as I'm concerned. And that's what I want to do. But see, what's happening is that I have all of these things that I feel that I've not been able to get into the music yet. I've not been able to express or communicate this particular thing that clearly, that succinctly in a song. And so I'm going out now to see if maybe some of these other things that are inside me also might be meaningful to people, might also be something that other people can relate to. That perhaps in some of these areas I might even say it for you. So, we shall see. I want to talk to you about being a human being. I want to talk to you about the world the way it is, the way it was, and the way it can be. I want to talk to you about survival. I'm going to talk to you about evolution. I'm going to talk to you about the transformation of survival. I feel obligated to tell you that I do not have a college degree. I barely made it through high school. And whenever I get the chance to come say this, I always start off like, who are you trying to kid? So I don't want to try to kid anybody. Honest to God, I don't. I just want to say these things hopefully as clearly as possible and see if some communication can't be made. You see, I don't think that anything that I have to say is brand new. I think a lot of people are saying it, but I don't observe that it's being communicated very much. So I want to try to see if I can't communicate it. I observe purpose in the universe. I see absolutely nothing that is without purpose. From the smallest particle of an atom to the universe itself, it is full of purpose. There is seemingly intelligence behind it. It works on a time perhaps that makes our day-to-day existence in this world insignificant, but to me it is a living, breathing universe. And it contains life. And everywhere I see life, again, there is purpose. From the smallest blade of grass to you and I. You know, now you look at things, and it's pretty easy to figure out purpose, not reason. I'm not talking about a reason for something, but that there's a purpose in its existence. And yet so many of us seem to question our own purpose. Is there a purpose in our existence? Well, I have to tell you that I feel that there is. I'm not necessarily sure what it is, but in relation to everything else around us, obviously, we must have a purpose. Then what can that purpose be? Maybe we'll find out. As life evolved, different things started happening. You know, first of all, it was just tiny, small, single-cell creatures that divided and got to be more complex, and pretty soon there were organisms swimming around, organisms, a collection of cells, you know. And then that got to expand, and pretty soon there were fish in the water, and they started crawling out and got to be on the land, and it evolved and evolved and evolved. And there got to be a point where there was a thing that I think is called conditioned reflex. Does that sound right? Where what happened is that an animal in a certain situation, you know, would be doing something, and let's say it's like a deer out here in the woods, and all of a sudden he gets a certain smell, and he hears a twig crack back here, and about the time he notices that, he gets a real heavy slap on the rump. In fact, it cuts him open a little bit, and he's gone, you know. Well, what happens then is that the next time that he hits that smell and that twig, he's gone before he gets the slap. Survival it has to do with. And I think it's called conditioned reflex. So there was that aspect in the development of mind, if you will. Then, and I think that this is the most recent aspect of evolution, was the gift of consciousness. All right? People started being able to recognize, define, or describe what they saw, and to communicate it to somebody else, to remember it, and to communicate it and to talk about it. And it was a reflection of the tools that were given us of consciousness. So, back when consciousness started, it seems to me, I'd like to paint a little picture for you. And let's say we have a guy here whose name is Black Hawk, and he's an Indian, and he lives in these mountains. And, well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Time out now. Too excited. I've been waiting for so long to do this, you know. Okay, before I get to Black Hawk, people, when they started coming out of trees and walking on the land and started making weapons and started hunting and farming and picking berries, they found that it was better to be together. It was more effective if they could work together than to work individually on their own. So they started getting together in communities. All right? And there was a group of communities here in the mountains. There was another group of communities over at the same time doing the same kind of process out in the plains, some over on the ocean, some out there on those islands, some around the world. People, human beings, just becoming human beings, if you will, and starting to deal with the world and notice what was going on and notice what it took to survive, you know, and notice that they had a better job at doing it if they were together. And they started talking about that and communicating it. And then what we learned wasn't so much stuff that, you know, I learned because it happens to me. All of a sudden we could pass on information. Education developed. You know, back in the very beginning of time of human beings. And what happened that time, if you will, is that there were some people who noticed, you know, it's like there were things going on that you couldn't understand. I mean, it wasn't food that you ate, and it wasn't walking to get someplace. It was that people, you know, little things were born. How did that happen? And people died. And how did that happen? And sometimes people got sick, and then they died, or then they got well. And how did that happen? And there were things like this thing that comes on, and part of the time that we live is bright, you know, and sunny, and daylight, and part of it's dark. And there are different things that you see in the sky at night than at day. And what are those things? And clouds that build up over these mountains that, you know, so I've walked from here to the top of Mount Sopri. That's a long way. But I've seen clouds come up on, and that dwarf that mountain, that dwarf all of these mountains. And what are those? And what happens is sometimes, you know, it's like there's a certain period of time when those things are going on, thunderstorms and like that, and then it's all warm and sunny, and there's little showers in the afternoon, and then everything starts getting cold again, and we have to start gathering stuff together because it doesn't grow, and we need extra wood to burn, and we need clothes to warm ourselves. And then there's this period of winter, and the days are very short, and the nights are very, you know, what is all of that stuff? You know, that's, to me, what went on for those guys. And what happened is that this group here, in this environment, Black Hawk, the fellow I was talking about, started giving all of those things certain symbols so that we could talk about them. You know, we could talk about that stuff with each other. Then I don't feel so much alone. You know, it's like in those songs. Somebody says it for me out there. There's somebody that feels it like I do. I'm not so much alone. So we started talking to each other. And this group of people here, Black Hawk and his fellow Indians, gave certain symbols to all of these things I've described to you. And that got to be, you know, initially that got to be their religion. I mean, those were great and powerful beings that we only saw in the form of clouds. And they were spoken of as deities, as something beyond and above and better than us. Something that we were at the effect of. It was the beginning of religion. You know? Now, religion to me is the definition of your spirituality, your spiritual discipline. That is what your religion is. It's this form and these symbols and this way of doing things. And so the folks that lived in these mountains developed a certain form, all right, a certain discipline, if you will, a religion, if you will. Now, at the same time that was going on, though, there were a bunch of other guys over here on the ocean and had the same kind of stuff going on in their life. Some a little bit different. They weren't relating to the mountains and didn't have the same kind of storms build up. It was different. But talking about seasons and birth and death and sickness and healing and farming and when things grow and when they die. And they, too, gave them some symbols so that they could talk about it. Right? Now, it so happened, because of where they were, that they were different symbols and a different form, perhaps, than Black Hawk over here. Now, at the same time that was going on, halfway around the world, in the desert, there were other people starting to get together and starting to work to survive. See where I'm going? Same things, talking about the same things, but a different form, a different set of symbols. But they were talking about the same thing. All right, now then, what happens is that there get to be a couple of guys in there who are pretty smart. You know? And they start to be the ones who are naming it. They're naming that. That's what that is. And this is what it does. And there were obviously some guys who named it and said that this is what it does and that wasn't what it did, and so they didn't use that name anymore and didn't listen to that guy anymore. But the guy that did name it and described what it did accurately and helped me in learning how to deal with that, well, he got to be a very powerful man in my tribe. Right? He got to be the chief. Or he got to be the medicine man. He knew how to heal people, how to take care of them. You know? He knew when to tell us to start gathering things for the wintertime. He knew when to tell us to start planting. He knew what we could plant and what we could grow and what we could eat. He had figured it out. Maybe he had some helpers and stuff like that. Maybe it's a group of people. But they started, you know, they started taking charge and having it all set in, if you will. Well, what happened is that this tribe, once upon a time, ran into this tribe. And these guys, all of a sudden, there's some different folks there. They dress differently. They've come here looking, you know, they're expanding their territory. We're expanding our territory, and we meet out here. And right away, we're afraid of each other. You know, those guys look different. They must be different. We better hide from them. We better protect ourselves from them. We better not let them come over here to where we live and start eating our food or taking our women. These guys are a threat to our survival. Do you know that from the beginning of time, survival on this planet has been based on, if this is it, whatever it is, my survival depends on me keeping it for me and mine and from you. Now that is a simple fact, in my opinion. One of the very simple, basic facts about the human race. The notion of survival. It's the way it began. I think it began out of the kind of circumstances I've described for you, and it is the way it still is today. There's not enough to go around, and I'm going to keep this for me and mine and from you. That is what my survival is about. But I get ahead of myself. These guys over here had that form, these guys had this form, they had this form. They started going against each other. They were threatened by each other. And as that developed out of our own insecurity as human beings and just the way we operate and how we think, some of these guys started directing those differences. In other words, taking advantage of it in a way which drew us even further apart. And I think that individual people did that. Not the community, but one of those guys that got in power all of a sudden started to see, you know, he says, well, now look, he's talking to himself. I've got this guy over here, and he's doing the same kind of stuff that I'm doing. It's a little bit different way over here. It's a different area. And he certainly has got a bunch of people around him. Well, what happens if he tries to take my people? Or if some of my people start to want to go over there? What I better do is keep my group together and make sure that he doesn't get any credit or acknowledgement at all. In fact, I'm going to start talking about how crazy that loon is over there. Look, he's talking, he calls that. We all know that it's this. Right? I mean, it's ludicrous. You know, I say a lot of this stuff very simplistically, and perhaps get redundant, and forgive me, it's my lack of experience, but I just really want you to get how I look at this. You know, there's a guy over there that's calling a cloud a turkey. Now, you and I we're not fools. We can see that that's not a turkey. This is a turkey, and that's a cloud. You know? So that guy's crazy. I mean, let's not hang around with that guy. In fact, let's go rub him out, because he's a threat. He's coming over here trying to tell us that this is clouds and those are turkeys, and we know better, and let's not let that happen. And by George, it worked. We're people. We don't know any better. We're stupid, man. I mean, this guy tells us that that's what it is, and before we listen to somebody else, we'll go with it. This is the way it is. And if he said some of this stuff and it's been right, well, by George, we'll follow him to the ends of the earth. Unless something comes up that starts swaying us a different way, if it stops working. You know? At least you would think if it stopped working, we would wise up. But we haven't. You know? I mean, the same bullshit is going on right now in the world today. Do you see that? We have got a world, friends, that was made to work, people that are here for each other, but what happens? We got a lot of people over here who live this way and dress this way, and the way they speak about the spiritual aspects of their life has these symbols and this form, and it's different than ours. And so we hate them, and so we're against them, and so we do whatever we can to stifle them over here, or do whatever we can to push them, to force them to start doing it our way. God knows that way doesn't work. Our way works. It has to, because we're stuck in it. And if it doesn't, we're going to die. So by George, it works. You know, it's like... Excuse me. In my mind, what I've described for you is the way we started separating ourselves one from the other. And that in our own evolution, in the evolution of life and of consciousness, that it was a necessary and proper and appropriate way of holding the world that we lived in and our relationship with each other. I don't want to make that wrong. You know, that's the way it was, and that's how we got to be here. But if we stay here today in that mindset, I want to make that wrong. I want to make it of critical importance to you. I want you to find out that thing that I just described, that aspect of separating ourselves one from the other, for whatever reasons, is the sign of our death on this planet. It's no longer survival. We live in a world today where we take advantage of every excuse imaginable to separate ourselves one from the other. Whether you're Russian or American. You know, it appalls me. I'm an athlete, and I love sports. And I rejoice in the Olympic Games. And from when I was a child and watched those games, somehow when some young person got up there and was on the winner's platform and they gave him his gold medal and his national anthem, where he was from, the people in the society that he represented, when they played that, I don't care who it was, what color he was, what country it was, I filled up to here, folks, and shed tears. And it still happens for me. You know? And it happens, I think it happens for a lot of people. And I think that what happens in that case is because we get a real sense of how magnificent we are as human beings. There is another human being. And out of his discipline and dedication and commitment, he has proven himself to be on this day, in this event, the best in the world. And that's what we are capable of. You know, that is our family. He is a brother. She is a sister to me. And I rejoice in his winning. And I rejoice in their competing. And it appalled me. Every city that I visited on my concert tour, when the Olympics were on, there was a big scorecard on the front page, Russians and Americans. How many golds, how many silvers, how many bronzes. Nobody else made any difference. All that mattered was how we were comparing, how we were competing with the Russians. I'm disgusted by that. Disgusted. So we separate ourselves, whether you're Russian or American. We separate ourselves whether you're communist or capitalist. We separate ourselves whether you're Christian or Jew or Muslim now with what's going on in Iran. I tell you that where this separation began is in the church. And there is nothing more powerful or more insidious in society today than the church separating people one from the other. We're all talking about the same thing. Don't you see that? I mean, I feel like I'm sure you do. But it's not the way we... But it's not the way we act in the world. You know, this little piece of knowledge, which I will assume we all share here and feel the same about, and recognize that no matter what the form, what the description, what the symbols, that we talk about the same thing. Then how is it, why is it that we continue to use that so strongly to separate ourselves one from the other? You know? We separate ourselves whether you're a farmer or a businessman. We separate ourselves whether you are man or woman. I mean, it's gotten to that. It used to be just young and old. Now it's man and woman. You know, it's always been black or white. I mean, those were obvious differences. So here we live in a world of absolute separationist tendencies. And everybody is supporting that. Some people by not thinking about it, not doing anything, not caring, and other people by consciously setting it up so that we're against each other. And we haven't learned a thing. We're still following them. You know? We still stumble blindly on, trusting that they're going to, you know, whatever problems are, they're going to take care of it. And yes, there have always been problems, and for a long time they were over there, and they didn't really concern us because they were over there. Or that was something that was going on, but it didn't really affect too many people. It certainly didn't affect me, and I'm going to pretend like it never happened and hide under the rug here. We can't do that anymore, folks. We can't do that. The world has gotten so small that what happens in Iran absolutely affects us here in Aspen, Colorado. What happens here perhaps has far-reaching effects on the rest of the world. I guarantee that. The world has got to be real small, folks. And it's acting on all of us. And these different things that we as people created to make use of, to allow us to be more efficient and effective in the way that we lived, to be able to work together in our own community, to be able to have this community work with this community over here, and this nation with that nation, all of those things that we created are now all of a sudden running our lives. And there are some people who are so totally immersed in it, who have for so long been involved in it, that they can't see a way out of it. You know, I don't know if any of you are paying attention to the campaign going on or anything. You know, I wonder how much people here in Aspen pay attention to the news, the rest of the world. And I worry about that because I think we should. Just because we're so very fortunate here doesn't mean that we should not be involved or should not care. Quite often I think that's the way we act here in this little community. And oftentimes, you know, there are so many things that are going on that belie that. So that's just me getting caught up in my own stuff. And I apologize for that. I do so sincerely. We have a political campaign going on. We have people spending millions and millions of dollars. John Connolly raised $13 million and spent it all. To what gain? What did he do with that for anybody? Huh? Boy, I could use $13 million at WinStar. And I bet you there are 18,000 ways that we could think of using $13 million right here in this community, much less around our country or the rest of the world. I made a speech a little over a week ago in Miami. I was invited down there by the Music Educators of America, the people who teach junior high, high school, and college level music, bands and choruses. It seems that my music is used in that arena more than any other composer in history. Thank you. But I don't want to make a big deal out of that, you know, and I'm happy to say it. And I don't mind telling you that because it really, you know, it blows me away. But it's just that, you know, though it works for those people, they want to use it and they're doing it for their kids and their kids are getting something out of it. And so they're continuing to use it, and they're telling some of their other friends about it, these national conventions, and they're starting to use it. Something there works. You know, and I'm real excited about that, excited about being part of it. So I had the chance to go down and speak to them. You know, one of the things that's going on now with our budget cuts in this country, all of the things we're kind of chopping down on, unfortunately, it doesn't seem that we can cut down on expenses, the kind of money we want to spend to put a highway through Glenwood Canyon. But we can cut down on the money that we're paying our teachers to educate our children. What kind of bullshit is that? You know, we're going to make incredible cutbacks in the public services that we have available in regard to our libraries. You know, that whole thing that went on, what was it, Proposition 15 in California? 13? That was such a great idea. Everybody got behind it. Talk to those people now, the ones who can no longer go get a free book at the library because the library's closed down. The one whose fire station down the street got closed down, and now the one they depend on is about 4 miles away. That's how that happened, you know. That was the result of that. But John Connolly can go raise $13 million and get a whole bunch of people to give up their jobs, leave their homes to go out and work for this personality and make him president. And then as soon as he's president, then they go back home to their jobs and they forget about all the support and where that support came from and the programs the guy was talking about. I submit to you that we get into it more for the personality and because of the media aspect of it, the event of it, but not the programs or the real process or what it is that we're trying to do there. That's the way it seems to me. And you folks feel that way? I mean, honest to goodness. And then some turkey comes with $13 million. And I tell you what, I don't think there's a leader in the bunch. There's not one guy out there that says it for me. There's not one guy out there who's talking about the world the way it is and the way it can be and the steps to take it there. Not one. Actually, there might be one. Pope John Paul II. He is the only world figure that I know who is in any way acting the way I think a human being ought to act. I think he's a wonderful man. And I don't agree with everything that he says, you know. Some of the things he says I disagree with very strongly. But he's saying it very honestly, and he's putting it out there, and he's really trying to put it out there for everybody. And he doesn't ask that everybody do it this way. He's willing to allow other ways, but if you're going to be involved in his way, you have to be in it pretty fully. You know? And he gives us a very honest and clear representation of that. He lives up to it. Anybody who lives up to what they're talking about, I find it very easy to support. Very easy to follow. Because I think we're coming from the same place and we're going the same place. So we have this world with a bunch of turkeys running around whose sole purpose seems to be to first of all get elected, and then to keep separating us one from the other. We have a world in which 15 to 20 million people starve to death every year. A planet that produces more than twice enough to feed the entire population of the world is a fact of our existence. And another fact is that 15 to 20 million people starve to death each year. That is our world. That is a reflection of you and I as human beings. 1 out of 8 people in the world is chronically malnourished. You know what malnutrition means? Better find out. I'm privileged to serve President Carter on a commission on world and domestic hunger. We've worked for the last year and a half really gathering everything we could from all over the world to find out exactly what is going on about hunger. And then to figure out something to do about it. And we've just delivered our report to the President. There are some things in it that I think are pretty mind-blowing, and some things that are great disappointments to me. But it's a good piece of work I feel that we've done. It's been a very interesting process to me, and it's like one of the things going on for me out of all the different things I've been involved in has been, you know, exactly why I got into hunger. You know, I look at all these things that separate us, and it's like you talk about nuclear safeguards. Boy, that gets to be polarized right now. Talk about the environment, wilderness, development, gets to be polarized right now, people at odds with one another. Talk about endangered species. You know, I read a couple of weeks ago in Dallas that there was a study group at Harvard University that has figured out that we are making extinct on this planet over 1,000 species of plant and animal life each year. Making extinct. No more, ever. What are we going to do in the next 20 years? Is one of those species going to be the human species? Might be. I got involved in hunger, started learning a little bit about it, and had some feelings about it. And I found out that when I talked with people, it was a little bit more difficult for them to get polarized about hunger. It's like generally when you talk to somebody about feeding somebody that's starving, yes, they would like to do that. I'd be willing to give up some of what I've got to feed somebody. And so they were less at odds, you know. Now when you start breaking down to how exactly to do it, or whose fault it is that there are starving people, well then right away we're knocking heads again. But it seemed to be a good arena to work, and then being involved in getting this commission set up, and then having the opportunity of serving on the commission, and what we've found and how we've approached it, the men and women that I've worked with, it seems to be still a very good and effective tool. And so I speak about it a little bit. You know, it's like we go back to this notion of survival. And the things that the commission has come up with, it's like, I know you've heard it from the Hunger Project, and you may buy it or you may not. So I don't want to speak about it from the Hunger Project. I want to speak about it from the Presidential Commission on World and Domestic Hunger. We can eliminate hunger on this planet in the next 15 to 20 years. We have everything that it takes to do it. The only missing ingredient, the commission says, the political will. I'm not too high on politics, so I say the popular will. If it becomes the will of the people, we will do this thing. We can do it. It is there for us to do. If it can be done, it ought to be done. And we will do it. We will do it. So just that, you know, that a body like that says it, boy, I think that's great. It's great. The commission says that we ought to change our sense of national security, redefine national security. This is pretty mind-blowing in my opinion, because it has to do with survival. And what they say is that perhaps we should look at the fact that it's not so positive and furthering anymore for us to increase defense armaments and our military capability, that doesn't really secure us anymore. If you look at what's going on in Iran and Afghanistan, it doesn't, friends. Everything that we've done has not secured us. We seemingly are powerless at a group of young people, students, who are holding our people captive over there. Perhaps we ought to redefine national security. Perhaps that aspect, that percentage of our budget which we've been spending on defense, we talk again about what we're cutting out in schools and in public services and what we're using more of to build bigger and better bombs. You know, that's still the world we live in. This separates. This, in my mind, joins together. We're still caught up in promoting this. Our money. And that's what they're using it for. Well, so the commission comes out and says, look at the world and look at what's gone on and look at what we can do here. And perhaps if you start to look at it, you can see how this issue of hunger can affect a whole lot of issues. It's like perhaps our foreign aid money is better spent not in securing a military base or giving them advanced military technological hardware, but in doing things that get down to the poorest of the poor in those countries, in those developing countries, in educating them and assisting them to take care of themselves, grow their own, become a viable entity, a viable society, a nation which can be a trading partner for the United States, some place that we can sell our goods to and they're going to be able to pay us for them. And they might have some things that they can develop or that are already there that they can give to us. And we can start working together, you know? But that's not the focus. And the report says a lot more about that. I don't want to get hung up on it. The thing is I think that we have come to a time where our survival as human beings, not just U.S. citizens, Americans, but as human beings, needs to totally turn around. I'm talking about a shift in consciousness. You know, what I've spoken of here in regards to survival and how we separate ourselves and how it's a natural and proper thing and how it's brought us to this place and this level of that particular kind of activity is exactly the way it, you know, it's just the way it is. But it's so much in ourselves that people can't see to turn it around. Well, I want to propose to you that we turn it around. And if this is the last barrel of oil or the last bushel of wheat, and there's not even enough here for me and mine, my survival, the possibility of my survival is furthered by sharing it with you. You know, the time is now. I'll tell you what happened for me. It's like, I remember going to church when I was a kid and sitting in the pew over here, in the choir loft actually, and listening to the preacher, whoever was speaking, talk about peace on earth, goodwill among men, and how Christians ought to serve one another, and, you know, like that. And as I drifted away from church, I heard it less frequently, and now even when I attend church, I hear it less frequently. It's more often something that comes up around Christmas and maybe at Easter. But 15 years ago when I first heard that, it had meaning for me. It had to do with the way that I felt about myself, those things that I did, the way I interrelated with my peer group, as I mentioned. You know, I didn't drink and I didn't smoke. There were also other things that I didn't do. There were other things that I did. There were some things that I'm very ashamed of. But what I noticed in all of those experiences is that I had a feeling, you know, it's like I sometimes would see people just being terrible to somebody. A group of kids, there was a gal that I knew, I don't remember her name, but she was the ugliest person I've ever seen. You know, and she was also, actually what I think I came to find out is that she was a little retarded. She had gotten to the point, you know, where she could go to school, she was in high school, but she just really had great difficulties. And she wanted so much to be liked. She wanted so much to have friends. And the people there who, you know, who didn't understand what was going on mistreated her so terribly. They would come tell her stuff to get her to do something, and she would do anything for just some sense of approval, for some sense of relationship. And they would have her do terrible things. and I couldn't bear to watch it. There was a friend that I had in a speech class in college, and he stuttered terribly. And people used to laugh at him. And I couldn't bear it. And I always, between classes, I'd walk with him to the next place. I was the only guy I knew that talked with him, and who, when he stuttered, just let him stutter until he got the thought out. I saw him a few years ago. He came backstage at a concert. He said, "John, I don't know if you remember me." I did remember him. And he remembered me, too. And he was there not because of John Denver, singer, star, whatever. He was there because I'd been a friend to him once upon a time. And there are things that go on like that. How often do we jump with somebody on somebody else? Who stands up? Who is always there to stand up for what they believe in and how they feel and the way they want the world to be? I don't always, but I'm working on that. It's like I was always waiting for somebody to start acting the way I think people ought to act, to start doing something about the world and the way it ought to be. And I kept watching for whoever that was going to be and when it was going to happen and where it was going to happen. Well, I found out, folks. It starts right now. If not here, where is it going to begin? It starts right here. And who's going to do it? I'm going to do it. If not me, who? So what I'm doing now is I've put together this concert tour to go out and talk to people about these things. And sometimes it's more focused on hunger and the commission report. And sometimes it's talking to people, high school kids, about, the same kind of thing I spoke to the graduating class here. Most often it's directed at this sense of the world and of how we got to be here and of how we need to turn it around. And it's up to us to do it. It's up to young people. It seems to me we're so caught up in the world now that we really can't see our way out. So if there's going to be a new way, and if there's going to be the kind of energy it's going to take to turn it around now, it's going to come from young people. And we really have to educate them at a time when people seem to be less and less interested in being educated. Why is that? Perhaps it's because what they're getting in schools has nothing to do with the world out there, and the world out there is absolutely meaningless and denying and unfurthering and diminishing. Why be involved in that? Why go to school? I think that it's possible for each of us, that people start asking me, what do you want me to do? Especially when I'm doing these press conferences for the Hunger Commission. What do you want me to do? And I think they want to hear something about going to, writing to your congressman or like that, or go giving money and start working with this organization. All of those things are valuable, but I'll tell you where it begins. It begins where you, in everything that you do, in every relationship that you have, show who you are as a human being, the kind of person that you are. And if you start doing that with a sense that gets to be a little bit more expansive, not just me right here, me and boy, I'm going to protect myself from the world, but me who is with you, the world of human beings. If you start acting like that, then I think all of this other stuff will take care of itself. And there will be countless things that will come up that you can do, specific things that you can do. But where it begins is be yourself, be a human being, recognize that you are one of many on this planet. And no matter how we say it or how we describe it, that we all go for the same things. As an individual and trying to grow and finding out what in the world it is, what is all of this stuff, and then how do I relate to all of it, and what are the things that I can do, and what are the things that I don't do, and who are the people and the places that I have an opportunity to visit and be with, and who do I not get to be with, and who this person that I found that I want to be with me for the rest of my life. and then what we want to do to have children, to have a child, to have that child grow and become a human being, and to grow like I did, and to do everything I can out of my experience to educate him as to, what the world is like and what to expect and how to deal with it. A world is becoming increasingly complex. Do you think that Iranians do anything different than we do in that regard? Do you honestly think so? Do you think that Russians do anything different? Do you think that Chinese do anything different? I know that they don't. Human experience is the same. We are human beings and we experience the world, and it is the same for each of us, and it is that most clearly which binds us together, that in the spirit of life itself. And it's time that we start representing that in each and everything that we do. It's time to make the world work. What I'm here for, what the WinStar Project is about, is simply that. Harmony in the universe. Harmony between people. Living, breathing as a single organism. A life that is worth living. So what happens, you see, oh God, I get caught up in all this stuff, and now I get to the point. Do you want to stand up for a minute and stretch? Is it hot in here, or can I have a few? It's like what I want to do is I want to talk about all of this stuff, and then I was going to answer questions about anything. I'm sure that some people may want to ask questions about what I've said and some things that I haven't talked about, and I'm willing to do that. But now let me get to the point. Rats, I apologize, folks. So here we all are. We see where we all are, what we're talking about, and we have to turn it around, okay? So this is the next step, in my mind, of evolution. All right? If the last step, recognizable step, had to do with the addition of consciousness, then I propose to you that it is out of consciousness that we will make the next step. And this is how we will do that. We will consciously choose life over death. We will consciously choose those things that promote life and well-being over those things that don't. I'll give you some examples because it's going on right now. See, I don't want to paint such a bad picture because we are making that change. So, let's say that, we've had everything available in all these different areas. And out of that, we've tried everything. Now we're going to start consciously choosing those things that work. Both in the way we live our own lives and in the way we deal with one another, both as individuals and as nations. All right? But where it starts is in your own life. And so a conscious step that you can take then is, how do you eat? Nutrition. How many people do you know around you who have started cutting out all the crap junk food that they've been eating and are starting to have a little bit more healthy diet? And you can see it in every aspect of their lives that it works. I'm almost a vegetarian now. No, wait, that's no big deal, and I still can't pass up a good taco. But I've started living, it started feeling more and more natural to me, and all this other stuff didn't work so much, and I kept getting more and more over here. And now, there have been 15 people coming to me, and I said, John, have you lost weight? They go, John, you look great. Have you lost weight? Yes, I have lost weight. And yes, I look great. And I've got a ton of energy. I've got more energy than anybody in this room. Or maybe all of you. As much as all of you. The thing, it's like Tom described the schedule I'm on. 109 concerts in less than 6 months in 89 cities across the United States, plus in each one of those cities a press conference before the show, plus every day either a speech or an interview in the city in which I'm working out of. My day off, today is my day off. See? So that's my last day off is when I went down to Miami to speak to those people. But, I feel better. Now if I can cut down on my drinking... But I'm working on that, So here's the way in which We're starting to show who we are as human beings. You know, now a lot of people don't consciously choose in time. Or for some of them, it gets to be where right up where the doctor says, look, friend, you're going to have to cut this out or you are going to die. And all of a sudden they do that. I'll tell you a story. My father-in-law runs a restaurant up in Minnesota. Every night he's out at the restaurant. He helps prepare the food sometimes. He's a wonderful host. He greets people at the door. He visits all the tables, makes sure things are going well. He's the only man that I ever knew who looked like he swallowed a bowling ball or a watermelon. Everything here was all fine and delicate, but he just had this gigantic tummy, you know? And he started, and with drinking at the bar and stuff like that, the people there, I don't think he was an alcoholic or anything like that, but it was a constant thing. It was always there. And he was always partaking, if you will. Well, it got so bad that this past Christmas, we sat down as a family to figure out, what we were going to... Somebody had to talk to Jim because it was starting to show in every aspect of his life. His relationship with his family, his relationship with the people that worked for him, and how the problems and the complexity of his business was starting to affect him, in his health, his blood pressure. And we were, somebody was going to have to sit down and talk to him, and we all sat down as a family, decide who was going to do that and how we were going to approach it. Well, you know what? Somehow, without, I guess it got to that point and he saw it, but he made the changes. Since Christmas, he's lost about 25 pounds. His whole thing with the family is smoothed out. He's changed his eating. He's cut out drinking, maybe a glass of wine with dinner. No more hard alcohol. He looks great. His face is shining. His eyes are bright. He's a happy man. He's got thousands of problems going on with his business. The way inflation is hitting everybody in this country. But he's dealing with it. And he's keeping the people who work with him together. He made a conscious choice that has shown in every aspect of his life. And it came out of his diet. All right? So that's something that's available to each of us. And we don't have to wait until we get there at the doorway and the doctor says, now is the time. Or another guy stands there and says, too late. We can start doing it now. And I guarantee you, out of my own personal experience, that you will feel better about everything. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, now, what about if we consciously choose to change our posture? I have a friend, Ron Lemire here, who is involved in WinStar, and he does a thing called Hoshimotherapy, and he's come up with a thing that has to do with posture that's so mind-blowing to me that I can't believe it. And it's consciously redirecting our muscles. Oh, I'm trying to get you to get this. How do people stand, walk around, right? And we kind of walk like this, right? We look down and swagger, or, somebody's cool, So we got all of this stuff going on, but here we're getting more and more down to this. Do you remember where we came from? Well, we're going back that way. Watch young people, the way they slouch around. So what about if you take that, and even if you take what you're used to, and you have a situation here, and I got my fanny sticking out, my belly's forward, my shoulders a little bit sloped like this, okay? I'm pretty relaxed right here. It's the way I used to stand. All right? Now then, I have this fellow talking to me about the fact that this doesn't have to be that way, and this doesn't have to be that way, and I know that this is what we're taught and what everybody believes, but what if we change a couple of things? What if we bring your hips more forward and under, and rotate this back, and straighten your spine? It doesn't have to be 3 curves in your spine. No? Fatah, are you listening? Fatah Evans is one of the most wonderful men I know in the world, and I love him dearly, and he's had so much to do with my own personal growth that I don't know how to thank him. And he's a chiropractor, and he also comes from the school of the curves in the spine. So I'm trying to return some of this and talk about the possibility of a straight spine. So as opposed to this, we start getting to, more of a thing like this. I'll tell you what, here's one of the things I'm going to try to do. I'm trying to consciously choose some things that have to do with showing this positive sense of change and evolution. And I tell you, a year from now, what is the date? 21st of April. A year from now, within a year from now, I expect to be at least an inch taller. Big deal, you say. Well, I think it will be a big deal, you know? I mean, if you can demonstrate that and have the demonstration of it affect you in a way that people used to see, people used to see me and every once in a while sitting at dinner, I'd do this. Oh! I had a back thing going on for me that I thought I was going to live with the rest of my life. A pain that I was in. And like I'm pretty good with pain. A lot of people say it differently. I'm pretty good with pain. And so I suppress it. And just nobody knows except the people who are really close and notice when I'm doing this, or notice that I have to get up at night and walk, and when I get up in the morning and I can't straighten up. I don't have that problem anymore, folks. That's the thing. I imagine a lot of people have problems with the lower back. Somebody that stands up on stage for 2.5 hours a night playing the guitar has a problem with their lower back. I don't anymore. Because somebody taught me something. Somebody's showing me something. It has to do with breathing and standing and being relaxed and getting in a situation where you're not collapsed on yourself, but you're suspended. And all of a sudden I find that I have energy. I was using so much energy standing. I've got more energy now because I'm suspended. I'm hanging there. It gets to be like there's somebody up there that holds a little string along. And if you want to run very fast, there's like a trolley up there, and there's the guy. And it's a wonderful feeling. It feels like life. You know that? It feels like life. And eating vegetables feels like life to me. And the way that you cook them, the way that you prepare them, and what you do before you partake of that, and how you use it in your body, and how you use your breath. I also expect to give up my glasses. I'm not going to set a time limit on that. I think that's a tough one. But I'm going to go for it. I want to be an example of this stuff that I talk about. And so I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity I have to go talk to people about these things. And here's another way to choose life. Let's get those people in Washington to know that not only are they there because they're supposed to lead us, they are also supposed to reflect us. And sometimes they forget it and we forget it. And let's let this community know, let's let the state know, let's let the country know, let's let the world know that what we're after here is something that works. Something that is furthering for each and every individual. That does not discount you. It includes you. And that life is big enough to include all of it. And we need not look at ourselves as a threat to each other. We need not separate ourselves. We can rejoice in our differences. That this guy down here can grow a beard that looks that great. I can't grow a beard. I've tried, God knows I tried once, and it's an embarrassing thing to behold. So I resent the fact that you can have a beard. And I think it looks wonderful, and I wish I could have one. But I can't. That's a big deal. Used to bother me. I never thought that I was a good-looking person. I never thought I was smart, intelligent, witty, all of that stuff, I was just who I was. And so often people, because of the way that I did things and said things, people would jump on me, man. They were just all over me. It's still going on today. There are people who write, I do a concert. God. I do a concert in Kansas City for 15,000 screaming people. The concert business is really going on. It's in dire straits out there now. Record sales are in dire straits. It's difficult out there. People don't have the money to spend. Now, I haven't had a hit record in a long time. But you know what? All of my concerts are selling out. And people come out there, and it's obviously it has to do with this thing I mentioned earlier. You know, there's something meaningful for them. They relate to me. It's not, everybody doesn't need to, and God knows everybody doesn't, but some people do. So they come and I'll do a concert for 16,000 people who are screaming and get standing ovations throughout the concert. And then you read the review, and the guy says, you know, I don't know what John Denver is doing in concert now. I mean, his music is still as Mickey Mouse as it ever was. And he still hops around on stage with those little wire-rimmed glasses and his blonde hair. And he talks about nature and mom and apple pie and brothers and sisters and like that. You know, all of this blank. That's the kind of reviews I get. I'm sure the guy was not at the concert. So, you know, it's neat to me. I guess I obviously push a lot of people's buttons. So I think that's great, you know, and I don't want to back away from it. What I want to do, it's time to stand up and be counted. And if I can't say it in music, I'll find other ways to say it. And this is one of those ways. And, you know, I hop around a lot. I have no idea. I feel like sometimes like I should set it down and make notes and outline it and stuff like that. But I don't want to do that. I want to come and I want to speak straight from my heart and show you how messed up your mind can make your heart and jump all around. And I may not make sense. And I'm willing to make a complete fool of myself, folks. I want to give something to the world. And all that I have to give is myself. And how I feel, and how I look at it. And that is what I'm doing. And it is direct. I have a purpose in life. I have chosen to have a purpose in life. I don't need anybody to tell me that. Don't need any divine figure to come down and say, John, Jerry. But I choose to have a purpose in life, and this is what it is. And so I want you to know that in all of this stuff that I've said, whether it's made any sense or not, perhaps there have been some things that have connected with you. If so, that's wonderful. It thrills me. And if it's not so, in fact, you know, it may be that it just didn't make any sense and we can just let it go at that, but it's something that you're violently opposed to in regard to what I've said, or that you disagree with totally, or that you look out and you see that negates what I've told you. And I mean, I told you 8,000 things. We talked about 3 or 4 tonight. But if what you see negates what I've said, the way of living that I've described, and what we have out there for us to deal with, and what we can make of it, then tell me about it. I don't want to make mistakes, but I'm willing to make mistakes. You know, there's a thing that I want to share with you here in Aspen, especially, that I don't talk to many people about, and it seems like it's difficult to talk about. And it has to do with the way that we relate to one another, you know? And it has to do with the way that we relate to one another based on how we feel and how we act in regard to what somebody does. Now, if somebody does something or says something, we handle it in 2 ways. Either we evaluate it or make a judgment about it. And in doing that, if you're doing that, then what happens is I get approval. If I get approval, I'll do it again. I want more approval. If I'm not getting approval, if what you're putting out there is totally bad, then I won't do it anymore. Golly, I'm sorry, I won't do it anymore. You know, and what happens then is that we start operating at the effect of what people are going to say about us. You know? And then we won't even do something that we thought we'd like to do, but we won't do it because we're afraid of what somebody's going to say. That's the way human beings operate. All right? So, either I'm at the effect of it, or I ignore it. I pretend it didn't happen. And most often here in this community, in regard to the way that I try to live and take advantage of what privacy I can, which I only have here in my home, I don't do a lot of communicating in the community. I don't do interviews. I don't go on the radio. I don't do interviews with the magazine or the newspaper. And I don't want to. You know? So it may seem to you that I don't care what you think about me. I don't care what you feel about these things that I'm doing. I don't give a damn. I want you to know that that's not true. I care very deeply. Now, I will not let your evaluation or judgment of my activities run my life. I think for myself. I will make my own decisions. And I will live my life in a way that works for me. And within the framework of everything I said tonight, you have to know it only works for me if it's working for you. But I will see past the evaluations and the judgments. And I will not let them run my life. But I do want to hear what you have to say. I do want to know if we have a relationship. It means a great deal to me. This is my home. This is where I intend to live my life and raise my children. You are the people that I want to live with most closely. The biggest thing I think I'm doing in my life, WinStar, is here in this valley. And includes you. I do care. And when people say things, I weigh them very heavily. And think about them. And then I do what I want to do. I promise you that I will always and forever, as long as I live, give you myself, totally and completely. And I appreciate the opportunity of being with you and having you with me. Thank you. So in light of that, and having purposely not allowed Channel 7 to be here tonight, or Grassroots, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody would like to ask about anything. Yes?
I can relate to most of the things you said, but one thing that worries me, I do agree that the world isn't working, and that's probably why I came here. I was scared to death out there. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I was in a position to view a lot of corruption in the government and the Environmental Protection Agency and that sort of thing. After about 12 years of it, I kind of escaped here to make it work in a small way. Aspen seems to work for me. There are a lot of people here who maybe are more concerned about the environment, about living together in harmony. So what you're kind of saying is we should all kind of make the world work. I'm kind of thinking maybe we should make one little part of it work, and everybody should do it. I don't know how to make the world. It scares me. How do you make the world?
Well, the first thing you do is that you don't run away from it or try to escape from it, which are two words that you underlined in your question or your statement. The second thing is that, what I've really tried to point out is that the way to make the world work is to make your life work, you here. And yes, it starts, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Start it right here, but you have to take another step. Keep stepping, keep moving, Run to the world. As bad as it is out there and as hard as it's getting, and I tell you, friends, it's going to get real hard. And there is no escape. I mean, it's even going to hit you here, sooner or later, if it hasn't already. Embrace Tiger. Make the world work. Embrace Tiger. Dance with the mountains. Song I'm writing. Yes.
You feel in all these problems the family unit is important?
Absolutely. I think that one of the most serious deteriorations going on in society today, especially here in this country, has been the deterioration of the family unit. And I think that a lot of what we're talking about here can be found again there.
You think all the problems, as hunger and many of the problems, are afraid of tackling all the major problems in the world and not facing them?
Well, I think that's part of it. You know, it's part of it. See, the thing that I'm banking on is to go talk to people. See, I think if a change is going to be made, it's going to come from the people. It's not going to come from the leaders. It's not going to come from the governments or from the church. It's going to come from people. I don't care how strong a program you have, how good a program you might have in regard to the job that needs to be done, how much money you have to spend on it. It ain't going to work if it doesn't have the support of the people. The best example I can think of, recent, the war in Vietnam. You know, the highest technological military force in history, with all the money and energy, manpower that the United States of America could garner together, went over there and accomplished nothing. Nothing. It was not a popular war. You know, the guys over there didn't know what they were fighting for. They certainly didn't feel they had the support of the people over here, back home, and they didn't have the support of the people back home. We didn't know what we were fighting for over there, and many of us were against it. You know, a lot of people were standing up. I think they started standing up about a lot of different reasons, but what it was is human beings. You know? So it's got to come from the people, in my opinion. And what I'm trying to do here is you know, it's like the commission. They wanted me to get myself and another commissioner on the Tonight Show, and they wanted me to get an interview in People magazine, and they wanted me to get on Phil Donahue's show, and they wanted to get the story on the front page of the New York Times. They were going to go, you know, barter for that. Now, see, a lot of that I can do. I got to be a pretty powerful person in certain areas. I can get on the Tonight Show anytime. You know? Big deal, you say. Big deal, I say, too. You know? But what happens is you go there and get on the front page of the New York Times, but nobody reads it, or nobody out there is willing to hear it yet. So the next day it's on page 42, and then it's gone. And it doesn't very easily come back. So as opposed to starting up here, I want to start right down here at ground level. And I'm going to go all over this country. And I'm going to talk to everybody I can talk to, making speeches or doing press conferences, not about John Denver the Entertainer and what my next show is going to be and who I was starring on my blah, 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 but talking about this thing that I've gotten involved in and how it's affecting people's lives and how it's going to affect them and how it's the people that have got to turn it around. I'm going to talk to millions of people, friends, over the next 6 months. That's why I put that tour together. And then you know what happens is, like, I go out to these things and I talk, and I say in the press conference it's more from the point of view of hunger, or focused on that. But you see where the cameraman pretty soon is not looking through the camera lens, he's sitting there listening. And there's always somebody at those interviews who's trying to get me. And pretty soon he's not trying to get me anymore. And so at the end of the interview I say, look, you guys, I appreciate you being here, and there's some things that I say, but I say that I'd like you to be my guest and come to the concert tonight. You and whoever you'd like to bring. I sing much better than I talk. And I do. But they all make some comment about how I'm talking pretty good. But some of the things that I have to say do ring through to them. And then they write it in the paper, or it's on the news that night. And there are millions of people hearing this stuff. And maybe it's just a little tiny seed, a little tiny chord over here that's actually been hidden. The old harp of the heart got bent. And there's a string over there that nobody's plucked for a long, long time. But it's still there. It's the human being string. No?
John, could you elaborate a little bit on that last question about the family unit? Because what I tend to see too much is that the family unit is really being used by more fundamentalist type groups as a very restrictive method of rather than as a free type thing.
I agree. And I think, you know, it's an aspect. I think that people are looking today, and either if they're looking, they're not finding, or what they're finding is very, very restricted and really isn't working, in my opinion. Or excuse me, or they're not, they don't care. They're not even looking. And everything that the children do, you know, they don't even take the time to correct them, you know, or they don't even take the time to be with them. You know, they don't enjoy one another. This thing going on, you know, that movie Kramer versus Kramer. Do you know how wonderful a movie? I mean, of course, it was a glorious movie. But you know what was great about that is that this guy talked about how, you know, here was a guy who I got caught up over here in the job. And yes, I was doing this. And yes, he says to his wife, I know that this is why you left, and I know that I wasn't there. But I've changed. I am capable of changing, and I have in fact changed. And I am there now. And I may make mistakes, but I'm giving him everything I've got. You know? Now, well, I just really got a lot out of that. I think there's a lot of conflict going on in the world where that's the case. Where it's either the mother or the father or both. Or the kid is seemingly, you know, kids get alien, it seems to me. And if they get alien, you know, all of a sudden we don't want to have nothing to do with them. So we either beat them about the head and kick them out, or we ignore them, or whatever it is. But that's the way we deal with one another in our own families. We take this stuff that's going on to separate us. Do you know how much shit I used to get from my dad about my long hair? The substance of my relationship with my father for most of the time when I was in high school had to do with my long hair. And the fact that I wanted to play a guitar and didn't know how to change a tire on a car. Well, I say didn't know how. I'll tell you how dumb I was and unconscious I was in that area. You know how the bolts on the wheel are louvered on one side so that they kind of fit in there? I didn't notice it. You know? Now my father, you know, my father is another guy. He's 60 years old. And my dad, he used to drink a lot. He's a pretty strong man. He's a hard man. He's been a military man all of his life. He's a pilot. And he just does whatever he does the best he can do. And he does not accept less than that from anybody. And he's a very intimidating man. And I had a real tough relationship with my father for most of my life. Over the last 4 or 5 years, it's really come around again. And now I feel like we're best friends. But what I was going to tell you is that Dad is he's a big man. He's always been a little bit heavy. And he drank a lot. Well, a year ago this past Christmas, he quit drinking. Cut it off, no more. He quit smoking. Cut it off, no more. Started doing his diet better, you know? Old fart is 60 years old, and he comes up here to Aspen, Colorado, and he'll spot me 15 points at racquetball, and I can't beat him. You know, I'm impressed by the old dude. And once again, he's given me something to live up to in a way which has a lot to do with the stuff I speak of, you know? But again, you know, the family, it's like I was talking with these people down at this musical educators conference, and they'd never had anybody from pop music come to speak to them or be involved in the meeting, the annual meeting that they have. And it's a hoop-de-doo affair. I mean, there are several thousand people there. And I'm the only one in popular music that's ever gone to be involved in that thing. And I made a little speech to them, part of which I've talked about today, but I had it focused more around musical education and that music matters, I told them. And I really wanted to inspire them to stay in it. It's getting hard for them out there. And I really wanted to do something to give them the spirit to keep the fight, if you will, keep the faith and stay with it. And I did real well. They've got a board of trustees that, boy, that's so funny to me. They have a board of trustees that's in that little area of hierarchy, you know, music educators, and there's guys who've been all of their lives musical educators, and there's 9 of them now. They're all over 50, and they are the board of trustees. And they asked me to be on the board of trustees after the speech. The letters we've been getting is incredible. I tell them, you know, music matters, see? You can make use of popular music. It's not just long hair or old folk songs or whatever it is. There's value in this too, even if it's punk rock. You know, you have to take a look at the fact that art reflects life. And if what you hear on the radio now, and if what's coming out, which is described as punk rock or new wave, that those kids are expressing themselves, that is their experience of us. Did you ever look at it that way? You know, especially as a parent, looking at a kid who's coming home and he doesn't listen to anything that you say, and he's caught up in this bullshit that I don't even have any idea what that is. And so we get right at odds at each other. Don't you know that that is his way of expressing his experience of you? If you just get a hold of that, well, all of a sudden say, oh my God. And it gets to be a little bit easier to deal with, and you might even grow together. I tell you, it's the same thing. This world, folks, is a reflection of us. I want you to get that. You know? I mean, that's all it takes, is to know that the way you are living, you know, it's like if you're a guy or if you're a person, and you're catching nothing but shit from whatever way you look. I notice there's some young people here. I beg your pardon. I'm speaking very strongly, and I'm doing so knowingly, and I don't mean to be abusive of the language or take advantage of my situation, and I sincerely hope I'm not offending you. I don't mean to do that. I don't have a very good vocabulary. And for you young people who may be starting to learn about words now, I would like you to know how much I would give to have spent more time with my English teacher. I never thought I was going to be making speeches. But that's one of the tough things about life. You get up someplace, had I but known I was going to be here, I would have done some of that differently. No, should always be aware of that. But the thing is, that world, if there's somebody where nothing but crap is coming down on them, they're not healthy, they're not happy with their job, they're not happy about this, and they haven't got a relationship that's working, and blah, 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 ad nauseum. That is an accurate representation of how they are presenting themselves in the world. If there's nothing of value out there, it's because there's nothing of value here. Little tiny simple truths, hard to work. It's like all of you could buy this 1,000% tonight and go out, and tomorrow just be right there, and the next day right there, and then something happens that kind of knocks you off a minute. So I have a wonderful thing going on now. I'm in therapy. It's a killer for me to admit that. And I tell you that I'm in therapy, and I'm getting a great deal of value out of it. And one of the things that I found out is that I have a tendency to take things personally. When somebody who's working for me doesn't do the job, I don't just handle it that they didn't do the job, I take it personally. And I get really angry and upset and into all of this stuff, man. And sometimes, it's like, it goes back to when I was in high school. I used to have a fight with my girlfriend, and I wouldn't talk to anybody for a month. I would not talk. Because my feelings were hurt. And I took it personally, and nobody cares what I think. And I'd go sit with my guitar. That's where a lot of people get. You take it personally. So maybe you can overlook taking it personally. When that kid screams at you, don't take it personally. It's just that that's the way the world is acting on him. Wonderful thing to be able to talk to somebody without fear. To be able to talk to anybody and really say whatever it is that's going on for you, and know that it's going to be communicated, it's going to be heard, and it's going to be responded to, and not in a way necessarily that's going to beat you into the ground. Or not in a way in which somebody's going to say, you stupid. I don't know how you can think that way. You know how safe and wonderful it is to be able to talk to someone? And do you recognize that that's all that any of us want to do? Is to talk to somebody? If I can just be myself, and show it to you without fear, then the world is a wonderful place for me to be. Especially if there's an interaction that occurs and there's some feedback that comes back from that. And don't you know that what I want most in the world is to find out who you are? What is it that you have to say? When you're walking down someplace and you see somebody, man, and it's written all over them that they're unhappy. I want to hold them. Hold them. It's okay. I'm sure that all of you have been on either side of that. It's called being a human being. Act out of that. You know? Make it safe for somebody to come tell you what an asshole they think you are. We had a wonderful thing happen. I get sidetracked, excuse me. My band. I have the best band that I can imagine. For those, people who familiar with music and musicians, I'd mention some names and you know who they were. But I have 9 people who are simply the best in the business. They're the #1 studio musicians on their particular instruments in Los Angeles. They work all the time. They're so good that they get triple scale. All right? People get scale, and some people get double scale. These guys get triple scale. All right? And if that's what they can make at home, working at home, and they're nice home and everything like that, then what more does it cost to have them come out on the road? And can you afford that, or how do you get them to be part of it when you can't afford that, the money? There's other things going on. So I have this great band. And we've got everything is so good for us in the way that we're working now and how we travel around. Everything is taken care of. We have nothing to complain about, so we complain about each other. And I had all this little stuff going on. It got to be so bad that when we finished our last concert in St. Louis, I thought that the next concert I have, which is Thursday night in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I was probably going to do that one by myself. So I went out to Los Angeles, and I got the whole band together, and I set them down in the hotel room a couple of nights ago, and I said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a little exercise. And what I want you to do is I want everybody here to take turns and go around the room and say everything that you can think of to say about each individual here. All the good stuff and all the bad stuff. And I especially want you to say the bad stuff. The things that you've been holding inside that you've never said. I want you to say all of that. Now, you over here to whom those comments are being addressed, I want you to listen, but I want you to let them say it. I don't want you to believe it, but what I want you to get is that is how they feel about you. That's not to say that what you did over here was directed toward them feeling that way, but what you did in fact get them to feel this way, and they hate your guts. And they don't like your talent, and they don't want to be on stage with you anymore. That's how strongly they feel about that, and that was how strongly some of them felt about that. And some of them felt that way about me in some things. But let them say it, and get that that's how you're putting yourself out there. That's what they are getting from you. Is that what you want them to get from you? Or do you want them to get something else? And are you willing to work toward them getting that? And are you willing to let them feel that way? And it was vice versa, in all these instances. And still feel that what we're doing together is bigger than that. Well, we got all this crap out here in the middle of the floor, boy, and it was just a gigantic pile. But the more it's like the more that got put out there, as we went around the room, the more that got put out there, the smaller it got. The lighter it got. In fact, by the end of the evening, it all disappeared. Miracle of miracles. And I'm not going to have to sing in Fort Wayne by myself. Questions? Boy, I don't know what the question was that brought all of that up. Yes, sir.
I want to thank you for what you said tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I've got one belief, one question, and one suggestion.
Great.
Okay. First, I believe that there are answers to all of the problems that all of us face. That there's a better way of doing everything that we are doing that we're having grief with. Okay? The question, one of the things that I do is I listen to people tell me about the problems that they have in business, technical problems, their lives, and I feed back to them what the possible alternatives are. I connect them with their own resources, connect them with resources outside them. And if you've got any specific suggestions to make it easier for me to do that, I'd appreciate it. That's my question. My suggestion, you got a beautiful pair of boots on, and you're really concerned about your back and your health, and I think that if your toes spread out a little more,
I agree. That's wonderful. What's your name?
Dick Schlossel.
Dick, thank you. That's just brilliant. Your beliefs. That's a wonderful thing to believe. You know, I don't believe that. I know that, Dick. I know that there's an answer to every problem. And I know that whatever is grieving us, that through effort, and actually maybe even without effort, but through addressing it knowledgeably and bringing other people into it, just that will take us to the other side of that grief. Sharing it, talking about it, communicating, creating a space within which it's safe to do so, to express your grievances, you know, and to have some sort of a sense that there's somebody who's going to respond to that and will assist you in moving through them. People in jail don't feel that very much anymore, you know. So, but I think that that's a wonderful thing, and I don't just believe that. I know that, and it's part of what I stand on. In regard to the question, I hope that answered it, actually, what I just said. And being someone who people can come and talk to, and who's going to get a response from that. I think that's a wonderful thing that you do. In regard to my boots, I think that, you know, that's a wonderful point, because there is going to be a time, folks, when I will probably choose consciously not to wear this kind of footwear, because it is not supportive of my posture and what I've started to recognize as how I can be and how this body can work. I haven't chosen that way yet, and I'm reminded of a wonderful Sufi story. A friend of mine has a teacher who he loves very dearly, and his friend wrote a book and talked about visiting some master in India, and he was all upset. He went to see this master, and this guy was, you know, I mean, he was a saint. But he went to see him, and he'd done all of these things, preparing himself to go visit the master. He cleansed himself, he fasted, he became a vegetarian. He thought very consciously about what he wore on his feet, on his body. And he got all ready, and he went to see this master, and he found this master was kind of a fat guy, and he ate meat. And he got all upset about the guy eating meat. You know, and how could you have answers if you eat meat? And the master laughed and laughed and laughed. He said, "Oh, you Americans. I eat meat because I like meat. I wear cowboy boots because I like cowboy boots." That is not to say that there's not value in, you know, what are you going for? And then how much do you attach what you're going for in regard to what you think it's going to cost to get it? It doesn't cost anything, friends. You know? I think that's something that people, it's like, I think if you get to be really conscious about it, you can put damn near anything in your body, and it's not going to do anything but assist your body. I'm not quite that powerful yet. Has to do with a hangover I had this morning. Actually, I didn't, but I couldn't resist saying that. Yes.
One of my big buttons is people that say "you know" a lot. What is it you're trying to communicate when you say "you know"?
I don't know. I think that to me, you know, I I appreciate you saying that, because one of the things that I'm really desperately trying to do in the process of speaking to people is to quit using the slangs and the mannerisms and the language that I resort to. I'm embarrassed about that. And I'm embarrassed about this little thing that you draw up. To me, it's just as bad as saying, blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing. Which you know? So, what it does for me is give me a chance to ask. I'm not saying that you know. It's like I'm asking, and I can look at faces, and whether you choose to pay attention to the language or not, I get a response. And that's how it's effective for me, and that's not to say that it's the most effective tool possible, and I regret it to the degree that it turns people that I want to talk to into not hearing me.
I'm just thinking possibly the button that he's pushing is that he's not giving you a chance to respond to the question that he's putting to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes, and in a situation like this, the tools, it still doesn't make a difference about the tools, but the situation is that until there's like a question and answer period, I'm talking and you're listening. But I want to get that response. You know, I look desperately for that.
You named like 2 courses on a road to self-consciousness, just posture and diet. Is there something more? I know you mentioned other things, but are there specific ideas that go on that road?
Anything. You see, you know? Yeah, I'm not going to tell you about that. It's like, in looking at diet, I see that there are specific changes that are going on now in society that have to do with people desiring to be in better shape. That it feels better to be in better shape. And that it's showing in how they exercise, jogging, or cross-country skiing, or whatever it is they do, that they do, in fact, exercise. That they are paying more attention to what they eat and to how much they drink. And that in regard to posture, that there are things going on now. You know, there's whole medicine, this field of chiropractic, which I think is just really incredible, and has been maligned for so long by the medical association. And yet I've experienced real value out of chiropractic assistance and people who know that and do it. You know, we did the same thing about acupuncture and acupressure. And I've experienced for my own self personally, you know, that it works. That it works. And there's just so much there that we have yet to learn. And in all of these fields, it's just, you know, expanding to start thinking about it. I think that you can find things that have to do with your own consciousness in regard to being a human being that have to do with the way that you do anything that you do. The way that you deal with people. It's like I did an interview with Playboy once. And they asked me, you know, you always come across as so up and happy and like this. Surely you can't feel that way. Well, and truly I can't feel that way. Sometimes I'm very depressed. You know, the highs only are reflective of the lows. And as high as I get on stage in front of 20,000 people who are totally with me and loving me and giving themselves to me, and as I'm giving myself to them, that's high. I get real low. I get when there is nobody around. There is not anybody. And no love. See? So I have both of those things. But I'm not one who wants to put my shit on everybody all the time. And so if I, you know, it's like I'll drive into a gas station. I've got all this stuff going on, but all of a sudden I have a chance to relate to this guy.